Welcome to the SAP HANA Academy. My name is Jamie. In the previous video of this series, we created an application in Web IDE which allows us to manage a list of contacts. In this video, we will further enhance this application by adding functionality which will allow us to utilize our application without any device connectivity. If you haven't already watched the previous videos of this series, please do so before continuing. A UI5 app contains a file named manifest.json, which is known as the descriptor. This file can be found underneath the web app directory of your application. This file declares all the metadata associated with the application and is broken down by namespaces. Each one of these namespaces has specific attributes that declare properties such as the application version, the UI5 dependencies, the OData services being used. In Web IDE, we have the option to view the file in both the descriptor editor as well as the code editor. There is also a namespace sap.mobile. Using this namespace, we can define the attributes which relate to offlining an application. These attributes will then be used to enable the offline functionality of our app during the build phase. So let's start by first declaring the sap.mobile namespace at the bottom of the manifest in the code editor view. The sap.mobile namespace has three different properties. The first being _version, which we can set to 1.1.0. The second is defining requests, which we can set to an empty object. And finally, we have the stores array, where we can define each offline store that we want created. In our case, we'll just define one store. For each store you define, you have three properties that can be set. The first being name, which in our case we will set to contact set. The second is the service route, which is the URL path to the OData service that we are using, which in our case is the GW sample_basic service. Finally is the defining request object, which defines the read requests that will be used to populate our offline store. Multiple defining requests can be defined, but in our case, we will create one that will retrieve the contacts as well as associated business partners. Make sure to save your changes. Next, let's open the master view and scroll down to the bottom and add a button to the footer, which will allow us to sync the changes between our offline store and the server. We can set the button's text to sync and the press event to on sync. And then we will save our changes. So let's now open up the master controller and add the code necessary to process the press event of our button. Within the onInit function, let's first check to see if the sap.odata object is available, which provides us access to the store name and the service route. These two values will then be used to initiate a new instance of the object sap.smp.offline interface, which will provide us access to many offline related functions. We will assign this to the instance variable OFFLINE interface. Next, let's declare the onSync function to handle the press event of our button. We can first check to make sure that our OFFLINE interface instance variable has been created. Using that, we can then check to make sure that the app is offline enabled. If this is the case, we will need a variable for the store name, and because we will be using a closure, a variable to store the scope. Prior to calling our sync, we want to set the list to show that it's busy. And then finally, we will call our sync function, which has three parameters. The first being the success closure, the second the error closure, and then finally the store name. If the sync is successful, we will refresh the items shown in the list and then set the list to not be busy. If an error occurs, we will display a message box with the message sync failed. And and we'll set the list to not be busy. So after saving our changes, open the application into the browser and then open up the developer console and verify that you didn't introduce any errors. And our sync button, which is programmed only to work on a mobile device, doesn't do anything. This completes our enhancements needed to add the offline capabilities to our application. You can find more videos on our YouTube channel, and if you would like to receive updates on any new materials, please subscribe to the channel. We can also be found on various other social channels.